They said Aaron Rodgers was finished, washed, a relic clinging to reputation instead of relevance. And then one freezing night in Pittsburgh blew that entire narrative straight into the Allegheny wind, because while the noise around him had grown louder, the evidence on the field suddenly became impossible to ignore. And that's where the real controversy begins. Not with the touchdowns, not with the score, but with how fast the NFL world flipped from mocking the idea of trusting Rodgers to scrambling to explain why they were wrong all along. Because when Mike Wilbon calmly said out loud what so many were afraid to admit, that Aaron Rodgers never lost his skills and that the league's collective impatience had distorted reality, it wasn't just analysis. It was an indictment of how quickly narratives replace nuance, and how quickly fans, media, and even franchises decide a career arc is over when the truth is far more uncomfortable. This wasn't a feel-good comeback story. This was a warning shot. Because the same voices that laughed at Rodgers are now forced to reckon with a quarterback who just led 4 straight touchdown drives, completed nearly every pass he threw, and did it in conditions that exposed another team's weakness as much as it highlighted his own resilience. And when Wilbon dismissed the hysteria around firing Mike Tomlin as silly, he wasn't softening the blow, he was sharpening it, essentially saying the outrage machine had eaten its own credibility. And that tension only deepens when you pivot to Philip Rivers, a quarterback nobody expected to be relevant again, suddenly walking into a matchup with the 49ers where Jeff Saturday openly admitted the league will adjust, press him, force him to hold the ball, and test whether this comeback fairy tale can survive real defensive teeth. This is where the NFL feels brutally honest again, because one performance can resurrect a legacy, but 1 week of film can tear it right back down, and the league doesn't care about sentiment, it only cares about what happens next. That's the uncomfortable truth hanging over this entire conversation, and it's why what was said on Pardon the Interruption has hit such a nerve across football circles right now. This all erupted during a wide-ranging episode that started light and ended sharp. But the heart of it centered on the Steelers dismantling the Dolphins in sub-freezing Pittsburgh, Aaron Rodgers carving them up with surgical precision, and the sudden reversal of a narrative that had been building for weeks. The game itself was straightforward. Pittsburgh won 28-15. Rodgers completed 23 of 27 passes, his best completion percentage since 2014, and led 4 straight touchdown drives that erased any illusion of doubt about who controlled the night. 2 weeks earlier, fans were chanting for Mike Tomlin to be fired, and now the conversation has completely flipped, which is why this moment matters beyond the scoreboard. Wilbon framed it bluntly. Wins change everything in the NFL. Not long-term legacies, not careful context, but one Sunday night can calm the mob or ignite it. And that volatility is exactly why this discussion exploded. Before we go any further, if you're enjoying this kind of unapologetic breakdown that cuts through the noise, make sure you subscribe to the channel and drop a like, because these conversations only get more intense as the season heats up. Now let's get into what Wilbon and Kornheiser really said, and more importantly, what it actually means. When Wilbon said it's easy to hate Aaron Rodgers lately, he wasn't excusing criticism, he was challenging laziness. The Jets stunk, that's not controversial, but the implication that Rodgers stunk because of it was, and Wilbon drew a clean line between situation and skill. He pointed directly at the numbers without embellishment, a passer rating of 98, 11th in the league. Not elite by old Rodgers standards, but far from washed. And that's where the league's impatience becomes the story. Rodgers didn't forget how to play quarterback overnight. The environment changed, and when he landed with a team that doesn't stink, his performance reflected it immediately. That's not a miracle. That's context, and the NFL hates context because it slows down hot takes. Wilbon didn't stop there. He went after the Tomlin discourse just as sharply, calling the fire Tomlin chant silly, not because fans can't be emotional, but because the Steelers are not a franchise that panics, and Tomlin is not a coach who collapses under pressure. Even Ben Roethlisberger's public backpedal was telling, going from suggesting Tomlin's time might be done to endorsing another decade, which Wilbon correctly labeled for what it was, a reversal born from reality catching up. This matters because it reframes leadership in the NFL, reminding everyone that stability looks boring until it works, and then suddenly everyone pretends they believed in it all along. The Rodgers conversation also exposed another uncomfortable layer: how quickly teams and fans turn on quarterbacks once the aura cracks. Rodgers in New York became a punchline. Rodgers in Pittsburgh suddenly looks like a Hall of Famer again, and Wilbon refused to let people pretend those skills evaporated and magically returned. He made it clear that this performance didn't erase future questions. Pittsburgh still has tough games ahead, but it absolutely destroyed the notion that Rodgers is irrelevant. That's not hype. That's restraint, and restraint is far more dangerous to a bad narrative than hype ever could be. And then there's Philip Rivers, whose performance against Seattle stunned even skeptics, including Wilbon himself. But Jeff Saturday injected cold realism into the conversation. He explained exactly what defenses will do now: press the line, tighten coverages, force Rivers to hold the ball, disrupt timing, and test whether Rivers is willing to push the ball downfield or if he's still operating with training wheels. That analysis wasn't dismissive, it was diagnostic, and that's what makes it so compelling. Rivers succeeded because things came out quick, because defenses hadn't adjusted, and because the Seahawks didn't force him into discomfort. The 49ers will not grant that luxury, and Saturday made it clear that at some point Rivers has to rip it, or defenses will creep closer and closer until protection collapses. This isn't about doubting Rivers. It's about understanding the league's cruelty. Success invites scrutiny, and scrutiny invites punishment. The conversation then widened to Patrick Mahomes, and again, the tone was not panic, but recalibration. Saturday dismissed uncertainty around Mahomes entirely, calling this a retooling phase, not a collapse, pointing out that the Chiefs relied heavily on Mahomes saving them, and it finally caught up. Drops, line issues, stale offense, all of it compounded, and Saturday didn't sugarcoat it. Even Andy Reid's offense looked behind the curve compared to newer minds. That's not an insult, it's evolution. And it reinforces the theme running through this entire episode, that the NFL is relentless. No one coasts forever, not even the greats. When the conversation shifted to defense and Micah Parsons, the language became even more stark. Saturday compared Parsons' importance to that of a quarterback, citing the massive gap in pressures between him and the rest of the defense and explaining how every defensive decision flows from his presence. Losing him, Saturday said plainly, is equal to losing a quarterback, and he doubled down when challenged, calling it a massive loss that will affect Super Bowl chances. That statement sparked backlash, but Saturday stood firm, and it ties directly back to the Rodgers conversation, because the league loves to oversimplify loss and decline, but elite players warp reality on both sides of the ball. Remove them, and everything else collapses faster than people expect. Even the discussion about cold weather wasn't filler. It reinforced identity, how football becomes more physical, more punishing, and how teams that embrace it gain an edge while others shrink. That context matters when evaluating performances like Rodgers against Miami. A team, Wilbon bluntly said, looked like they didn't want to be there. That's not trash talk, it's observation, and it feeds into why one win can feel seismic. By the time the show drifted through NBA topics, Cooper Flagg's 42-point night, the NBA Cup debate, and the ongoing skepticism about manufactured importance, the underlying theme never changed. Substance beats spectacle, longevity beats noise, and patience beats panic. Wilbon's measured dismissal of overreacting to Flagg's stat line echoed his refusal to overreact to Rodgers' supposed decline. Both conversations demanded time, perspective, and honesty. Three things sports discourse rarely tolerates. Even the NBA Cup argument, where Wilbon mocked the idea of hanging a banner while acknowledging it matters to younger players, reflected the same tension between legacy and immediacy that defines the Rodgers debate. What lasts, what counts, and who gets to decide. By the end, when the show touched on Arch Manning staying another year, Drew Brees' greatness still feeling underrated and the league's constant churn, it all circled back to one uncomfortable conclusion. The NFL and NBA don't wait for consensus. They expose it. Aaron Rodgers didn't ask for redemption, he took it. And Mike Wilbon didn't ask permission to say the NFL world was wrong, he stated it calmly and let the evidence breathe. Philip Rivers doesn't need a fairy tale. He needs to survive the next adjustment. And that's why this episode resonated so loudly. Because beneath the jokes and banter was a brutal reminder that careers don't end when the crowd decides they should. They end when the league proves it. And right now, the league is telling a very different story than the one fans thought they knew.